Take it away, Kevin.
Thanks, Nina. It's great to be back for another AIM webinar, and it's great to be with you, Nina, and everyone else here. Thank you for joining from all around the world. I think it's an important discussion that we're going to have today about Microsoft 365, and the primary reason being that Microsoft 365 today is nearly ubiquitous in business all over the world. For example, about 79% of healthcare organizations use M365, 70% of Fortune 500 firms, and more than 90% of small and mid-sized businesses with at least 100 employees are using Office 365. But despite the massive growth and the adoption of the platform, there's still a good bit of education that is needed for us to all fully understand and leverage the developing capabilities in MS 365. There's a lot of curiosity and a lot of confusion. Curiosity because many AIM members tell us that they're curious whether the new Microsoft 365 governance, records, and security capabilities are sufficient to handle their needs and their challenges, or whether third-party add-on functionality is required. And there's also lingering confusion about when updates to the platform should be made and where the platform is headed in the future. So today, in this special webinar, we'll hear about how information management professionals can not only stay ahead of the curve, but really start to gain full advantage of the platform. We'll see some demos and we'll hear about strategies and tools for pulling other content repositories and capabilities together under the Microsoft 365 governance umbrella, and overall, how to really fully embrace and leverage the many capabilities that are possible. And there are a bunch of really great possibilities, almost seemingly endless. And that's why we've extended this webinar today to 2 hours. And hopefully we'll get the guidance we need to really make a difference and really thrive with the tools. So with all of that, I'd like to open up our session today with our first guest expert today, Jordan Uterhagen. Jordan, are you with us?
Hi, I'm Kevin. Can you hear me okay?
There you are. Hello, Jordan. Welcome back. Let us all formally introduce or welcome Jordan Uterhagen to the program today. Jordan is the Managing Director at Cadence Solutions. And indeed, Jordan's here to talk about some tools and tips and solutions to make M365 really work for you. So Jordan, tell us more.
I'll hit the screen share button here, Kevin, and we'll get going.
Nice.
So you let me know if you can see that all right, and we'll carry on.
Looks good. Yes.
Excellent. So to everybody, I'm the demo guy usually in my role, and that's what I'll be doing today. So I'll walk you through a bit of a demonstration with the tool with Microsoft. I'll go through a bit about myself as well, and how I found myself in this kind of a bit of an information management journey. So I actually started on the customer side of the table, went through with a few folks I've noticed on the participant window here doing an implementation at a municipality. We hired a big logo organization to deliver a large ECM project. And as an employee of that organization, the client side, the municipality, it was an absolute disaster. We blew $300,000 in 3 months. We had a vendor that really didn't know much. And in the end, as a customer, we kind of had nothing. So I looked around at that time and kind of said, well, if this is the bar in the industry, as well as the way we're being treated ethically by an organization, I went out and I founded a company that does the complete opposite of what I experienced. So that's a bit about the story. And since 2013, we've delivered close to 80 projects across North America in the public sector, the private sector, and specifically in the information management, records management space. So that's been my specialty. I kind of call us a bit of a hybrid. We speak records and we also speak a lot of technology. A bit about Cadence as an organization. We've been in business since 2013. We're partnered with 3 major players in information management and technology. Microsoft, of course, today we're a content services partner with them. So that's a niche partnership within the 365 side of things that focuses on SharePoint, records management, syntax, those kind of technologies. We're partnered with OpenText, and we're also partnered with SAP. So going through the demonstration scenarios, if you're at the AIM conference in Denver, this will be close to a repeat of what I gave there. So if you were in person at that, hopefully we got to meet. If not, this will all be new. So I'm going to go through a couple of different scenarios today, right out of the demo environment. So we're going to go through the file plan. So I'll show you the Compliance Center, now branded as Purview, on the 365 side of things. Going to go through case closure of records, and there's a bit of a story here. We work with a lot of different records consultants in the industry that come in and make sure your retention schedules electronic ready, your system ready. And the one scenario that was always put in front of us that was a challenge without getting us to a third-party add-on with SharePoint was case closure of records. There's a number of third-party add-ons that kind of made a ton of money the last 6 to 10 years, focusing on that specific scenario: case closure of records, SharePoint on-premise, less so in SharePoint Online. So I'm going to go through a demonstration of that where we complete a contract, it attaches the label to it, and we can go through and perform a disposition on that record as well. I'll go through sensitivity labels. I know this is one thing that's not, I'd say, well known or used in a capacity that's a little bit different. So we'll go through labeling some documents with the pattern recognition, flagging it as personally identifiable information based on a social security number, locking down that document for sharing, and kind of showing you what the impacts can be just with an out-of-the-box tool without really needing to do anything, code anything, just simple configuration. That kind of leads into data loss prevention. When we do have things labeled with sensitivity labels, we can then identify them, stop that sharing, or reduce access at that time. And the final thing that's kind of ever-changing right now within 365 is legal holds. So I've prepped a legal hold already with some data that's in there, and you'll kind of see the power there in terms of legal holds. If you're a records manager or anybody in freedom of information or public records requests, you're really going to like to see this. So that's what I'm going to go through. I'm just going to jump to a different screen here and kill the presentation. So you should see this SharePoint screen now. If not, Kevin, jump in and correct me there. So.
Yes, Jordan, we're looking good.
Excellent. So I'm going to go through a contract management scenario. Our contract management configuration here is we have a procurement site. Within that site, we have a contract management document library. Within that library, we file and sort all of our contracts by vendor that we're doing business with. So we're presently doing business with Wonka Industries. We have a number of different document sets here, and you'll see the retention label attached to these sets. And you'll also see the contract status here as closed. So you can see we've done a number of different demonstrations here. We're going to go through and create a new document set, which we've labeled as a contract workspace. We go with our candy theme. We're going to pick our vendor. We're going to pick our contract ID. Have our type, some start and end dates that we can start to do some of the records on. So let's say we're doing just a couple-day contract here. We're going to do a statement of work to develop the latest gobstopper for Wonka Industries. Say it's $5,000. And if we do want to go out to a DocuSign, Jordan will be the signatory on that documentation inside that set. Inside of this library or doc set, what's going to happen is we're going to go and upload some documentation. Let's grab this here. And as of now, nothing's going to be flagged with a records label. We're going to leave the retention side of this out. We're going to go through, fast forward through our contracting phase. We go through negotiations with our vendor, Wonka. We come to some form of agreement. We go through the legal language, get it approved, actually go through, perform the contract. The vendor, delivers on everything they said they would. They deliver on that. And after they've done that, we're actually going to go through and set the status on this as a metadata field to closed. So on our actual doc set, you can see inside of here, we have the metadata properties from our contract workspace that was created. We don't have a label applied. and our status is set to drafting right now. We're going to go through and close the status. What's going to happen behind the scenes, and I should preface this by saying none of this is a third-party product. None of this requires a purchase outside of your standard Microsoft licensing. So we're going to go through and close the status on this contract. It's going to go through in a few seconds and flag the retention label as a statement of work. And it's also going to assign the compliance asset ID, which is used by the compliance center, now called Purview, to go through and actually perform the disposition on this content going forward. So it takes it about a minute or so to go through and do that. I won't just sit here and refresh for you, but I'll jump back to this in a few seconds where you can see that. So it's already applied this label here, CAD 100, statement of work for Gobstopper. It applies it to the contents within the doc set as well. So we can do that case closure of records from nothing all the way to a retention label applied. We're taking that onus off the user and putting that onto, or we're taking that onus off the records manager and putting it onto the user by simply flipping a flag saying contract status. Now, for the techies and anybody else who wants to automate this, you can go, bananas with this at a point of flipping a metadata field and moving content, archiving it, moving it around the system in addition to performing disposition. That's the first scenario I wanted to show. And we do have some time for questions at the end, and I made sure they're audience questions. So you should be able to chime in the chat, or I'm not sure if they're going to unmute the mics at that point. The second one I want to show here is the sensitivity label side of things. So one question we get asked a lot of is, I want to make sure that when I have something sensitive, that we can actually go through and lock down that document. And I know this is used a ton in banking right now with SharePoint Online, where if you do have some, financial information or personally identifiable information, non-health related, that actually goes through and locks down all that content without needing to chase it around. So I'm going to open up Tony Hawk's employee file. Same concept. We're containerizing this like we would in the old paper world with a folder with many different tabs inside of it. We're going to onboard Tony into our organization. And in order to onboard Tony, we need to supply a few documents to Tony. Or Tony needs to supply a few documents. One of the documents he needs to supply when he onboards with us, and I'll just flip the screen, is the data sheet. So I'm going to show you that this is absolutely blank right now. We're going to drop this into SharePoint. As this goes into SharePoint, it's not immutable. We don't see that red icon here. We're going to go through and we're going to fill this out. So let's say this was, and the reason I'm doing it here is I want to prove that the technology works without us doing the good cooking show analogy and having it all pre-baked for you. I'm going to paste in the social security number. For Canadian folks, I'll go with a social insurance number as well. And you're going to see it fire this policy tip right away. Your organization automatically applied the sensitivity PII. That's a definition and a term we get to configure inside of the sensitivity labels area in the Compliance Center purview that then has downstream impacts because we do have PII inside of a document that's inside of a system. Now, where I want a lot of you to think about this is not just from this scenario as new document, new content, and we move on. What if we're doing a mass migration and we can start to identify this by the contents inside the document? That gives a ton of value back to our records folks, as well as back to our users if we can start to tag this information without the need for them to do it. I'll refresh this here. You're going to see it's now immutable. And if we actually go through and perform any kind of sharing here, it's actually going to restrict access. So it's only going to allow us to share with people that already had access at that point that the PII went in. So we can restrict this a number of different ways, but this is a way of kind of downstream restricting that without needing to go and change permissions or write a huge workflow behind the scenes that says, when this document hits this stage, do that. We can do that with the content inside by simply using DLP or sensitivity labels in that way. Now, as that went out, what actually happens is Adam was our user that was logged in, and this is Adam's mailbox. Inside of this mailbox, we're going to start seeing information like this access has been blocked to this document because of PII. And as administrator of the system, I can see that an alert has been triggered as well. So all different ways to kind of dig into that from either administration, records management level, and end users can be notified as well if they're the owner of that content that is now blocked. From the DLP side of things, data loss prevention, if I just jump into Purview here, we can go and take a look at some of our policies. Now, if you're curious on how you configure this and kind of go through and define those policies, you can always give us a shout. Just give it 1 second to load up here on the alert side. And we can see that those alerts fired just a few minutes ago. I'm on Mountain Time in this environment. If we're looking specifically at a policy, we can edit our policy. We can apply that to different locations. Within here, I could go on for hours on DLP. We're applying it to emails, sites, and OneDrive accounts. We can look at the advanced rules, in particular, the PII rule, what we actually want to do within that PII rule to restrict access and information, to notify users upon this, to customize that message that you saw, that yellow tooltip that came across when we were in the Microsoft Word online editor. All that will show here, and this is all configurable. So this is all out of the box now. Definitely layered inside of the settings, but it is all there. I'm going to jump over to legal holds. I think I got about 5 or 7 minutes left here before Kevin gives me the hook off the stage. And legal holds is an ever-changing e-discovery section within Purview, even between a similar presentation like this between January and now June. They've taken away some menus, taken away tiers based on licensing, and kind of started to reconfigure this and modernize it a little bit. In e-discovery, if you're familiar with holds of any kind, you're going to develop a case. Now, in legacy ECM systems, this may have been called a collection. You usually start with a search, put in a search term, it blasts out a huge search result set back to you with 50,000 files or 5,000 files. You'd narrow that down kind of by picking through it and then release that collection to outside counsel or whoever really needs that information. So the way it works inside of Purview and Compliance Center is you define a case. So I defined this case this morning just called My Hold. Inside of this case, if you're in here, you're essentially working left to right with these menus across the top. Data sources, then collections, then review, communications, hold, processing, exports, jobs, and settings. Now, you don't necessarily have to go through each single one. There's different decisions along the way, but generally you're working left to right. As we set up data sources for a legal hold, there's two kinds, custodians or locations. Think of custodians as people, think of locations as sites or exchange mailboxes, shared mailboxes. For this example, we're going through and we're tracking down Lee Ju, someone in our environment here and in our organization that is getting kickbacks, we think, from one of our vendors called AIIM. We went out and defined a collection with Lee based on him being a custodian. And we're searching two different terms within our collection. So our first one, we just simply called kickback, and we're specifically looking for and found 9 items within that. Now, what we're actually looking for is some incriminating email information around Lee, and we're searching his mailbox, and we're searching also his personal OneDrive side of things. After we've done a collection, it goes into a review set. So the review set on kickbacks actually found some information. We can see that out of the 9 or so results that come in, we can see, hey, Lee, he was offered some money for AIIM, and our search term was kickbacks and AIIM. Anything that came back with that, we want to actually go through and actually look at that information as a e-discovery or a records manager and decide what we want to do with that too. There is annotations in here which we can do, newer feature and something that I think they're going to expand upon. And you can kind of see the plain text as well if you just want to take out all the formatting and anything else that's rendering inside of the document side of things, as well as all the metadata from the document and the result set here. So we can commit those redactions to a PDF. We can add somebody else to the review set if we want to review this as a team, or it needs to go through, somebody that's doing more of the gathering, and then it's going up to legal for an actual formal review. You can build all that in here just within the Purview e-discovery premium side of things. As we go back, we can actually send out communications. So we can put out legal hold notifications, escalations, and reminders. We can go through and actually put everything on hold. So I'm in as Adam right now, but we're going to go do that custodian hold on lead and start to lock down that information, proceed through processing to get this out, and proceed through exportation if we are going to send this outside the organization. So this isn't something that maybe our legal team can handle. We need to involve somebody externally. So Kevin, I just want to do a time check. I think I had till 27 after the hour.
Yeah, well, I know time is always so tight on these, Jordan, but we do have a number of questions coming in. I hope to get to at least a few of them before we have to move on. The first one is from Quinn Parsons. He's asking, does Cadence use anything like Power Pages or Power App portals for external submission for any documentation to the document library?
We actually have one active project with the school board right now, which is essentially a FOIP portal that we are using Power Apps for. So different, I think, than the question being asked, but can be easily transferred into that kind of use case.
All right, very good. And William is asking, many of the solutions I see are within a single site collection. I'm managing retention for an organization of great size with many site collections. My challenge is mapping crawling properties to managed property that can be used across all of those collections. What are your thoughts on that, Jordan?
That one I'm going to have to call an audible on and get some help with internally. That's pretty technical for this guy, Kevin. So if I can take that one down, I'll grab it out of the chat, or I can put up my contact information at the end here and be happy to follow up with that one.
Okay, very good. And all of this requires an E5 license, is that correct?
E5 is kind of the gold standard, and we have a matrix on our website and also an article on LinkedIn that kind of explains the difference between E3 and E5. In short, anything automated is E5. So if you want records labels to be automatically applied when you drop something in a doc library or into a doc set, you're going to need E5. If you need help getting a budget or a business case for E5, give me a shout. We've been through this a few times with other organizations because there's a lot more in that than just records. And you can make the IT folks really happy if you come to the table with what they're going to benefit from it as well.
Okay, great. And in our remaining time, Heidi is asking, how do you find the MS365 update effect configuration? Has there been any big impacts to the builds?
Not to the builds yet, but I'll say some of the design decisions that could have been better. And let me just grab the screen share quick there, Kevin. One of the things that they changed recently was this multi-stage retention in Purview. So I hope you can see this. This gives the ability to go from one label to another. So it's kind of an equalization with we'll call it the traditional ECM vendors. If this was released many months ago or a year ago, we would have made absolutely different design decisions than deploying retention schedules because we can link them together, as opposed to every label is, an island of its own. So this was one that, yes, it would change how we implement it. It didn't really impact anything, but you could have had a better design.
Very good. All right. That is Jordan Uterhagen, Managing Director for Cadence Solutions. Jordan, thank you so much for being a part of our event today.
Thank you very much, Kevin, and everyone else. Enjoy the event.
Well, thank you, Jordan. Let's move on to our next guest expert today, Jeff Milnick. Jeff, are you with us?
I am, Kevin. How are you doing today? Can you hear me?
I'm doing good, Jeff. Welcome back. Welcome back. Let's formally welcome Jeff Melnick to the program today, Director of Technical Solutions Management for Arctis. Jeff is here talking about how to enhance data security in Microsoft 365 applications. So Jeff, tell us more.
I certainly will, and thanks a lot. Hopefully you can see my screen at this point. If you're not,
Yes,
if you
we
can't,
can.
awesome. This presentation would be much less entertaining otherwise. So yeah, let me dive into it. For those of you who are really interested in security, what I'm going to show you today is really how Arctis is NC Protect can really help enhance your security in M365. Before I jump into that, just to kind of preface it, I think it's safe to say, obviously, most of us are in the cloud, and we've seen a lot of people move to the cloud relatively quickly, especially over the last couple of years for obvious reasons. So obviously, a lot of people transitioned already for SharePoint. A lot of Exchange transitions have taken place. Just for a little bit of context, even before this second statistic here, Teams has obviously exploded as well. So from April 2020 to April 2021, so over a year's time, Teams went from 70 million users to 145 million users. And then again, obviously you can see this second statistic here, where just in the next quarter, added another 105 million users. So obviously everyone sort of threw themselves into Teams. A lot of budgets and resources were tossed into work from home and collaboration. And with that sort of mass push, we've seen a lot of clients where they come back and say, hey, we realize we need to put some additional rails around how we're allowing our users to interact with M365, especially things like Teams and SharePoint Online, because those are awesome collaboration tools. However, people have found it's a little too easy sometimes to collaborate, especially with people they don't actually want to be collaborating with, guest users, etc. So with that having been said, a lot of people realize that those existing rules just aren't granular enough for what's available. So NC Protect uses attribute-based access control. So basically, we look at the attributes of the files and then the attributes of the users. And we use basic rules to determine how those users are actually able to interact with that data, if at all. So this changes dynamically. So if attributes change, for example, so it's not wedded just to the user and the data. It can be any of those attributes. So for example, you maybe want to have full access to a lot of files when you're on your company laptop inside the network, but maybe that should be limited a bit more if you're accessing those same files from your phone in the coffee shop. Also, a lot of users have really come and seen some of the issues with the sort of classic permissions models that we've been using basically forever, right? So I have HR users, they're part of my HR group and my HR folder, and that's great. But I've got things like employment contracts, and they need to be viewed by just people, a couple of people in HR, but maybe a couple of people in legal. And so I create additional folders and site collections and groups, and it gets a little messy. And then obviously, the big thing around that is it relies on people to actually put things in the correct place. So you can set up all the security you want on different site collections and folders. If somebody throws it into the all hands chat or the public folder, it's not doing you a lot of good. So we're able to provide the security overlay on top of your documents, and we really don't care where those documents are placed. So we can say, hey, sensitive documents aren't accessible to certain people. And it really doesn't matter if that's in Teams or SharePoint or OneDrive, we're going to lay that same set of rules down. So let me do this. Let me dive right into the product here. So hopefully you can see here, I've got the same site collection on two different windows. On the left-hand side, I'm logged in with this John Smith user, and on the right with this Megan user. And you can see probably right out of the gate that even though I'm looking at the exact same site collection, the user on the right has a much more limited view as far as what she's able to actually view and the types of files she's able to see. And you can see that what I've done is anything that's labeled as internal confidential, I've simply gone through and said, hey, this user just doesn't have access to any of this data. And again, they literally cannot even view that this data exists in this case. So again, this can be on any attribute. So in this case, I'm just using a SharePoint column attribute, but I could use something like the browser that the user's using, or their operating system, or again, their device. One of the really common use cases we get are for guest users. So again, not a lot of granularity with guest users for the most part. Microsoft either really lets you sort of turn them on or turn them off. So we're able to go through and say, hey, if a user of type guest is in here accessing data, they can't access any sensitive or confidential data in this case. We can also leverage, again, any other sort of data attributes, which could be sensitivity labels, MIP labels. We have our own data discovery and classification engine as well. Most, there's a ton of them out there. So if you've got one that you're using already and you're tagging data, we can definitely leverage those existing metadata tags and other attributes to set those rails around your data. Now, you can see this obviously works pretty well in SharePoint Online, also works in Teams. So again, it's sort of classic use case of, John here throws this file in here and says, hey, Megan, can you take a quick look at your personal info? Two problems with this, one of which is this is a Teams chat, it's not a one-to-one chat. And two, it's not even her data. And so in this case, you can see that on Megan's side, that file is not even visible. So we're actually preventing that file from rolling up for that person to even access. So it gives you some great granularity here. Now, let me dive in real quick as far as how we actually do this. Switch this over as well. It's a little bit larger. Hopefully, wanted to zoom. So just to give you a quick example, I go into these dynamic access rules, and we can set up a variety of different types of rules. This one's relatively straightforward. Actually, most of them are. Use pretty simple Boolean logic. And in this case, I'm simply saying, hey, if the audience is equal to internal confidential, and if the department doesn't equal management, you can't access that data. That access is denied. So you can set up a number of rules. You kind of stack these rules as well to get some pretty sophisticated outcomes. But you can see it's relatively easy to create these rules. And I've got one down here, deny guest access to sensitive files. It simply says, hey, if the user type is guest and the privacy check has failed, those are simply not accessible. They're not even visible in the display. So we're able to, again, to kind of put the rails around data to really give you a much stronger situation here. So let me do this. Now, obviously, preventing you from seeing data is pretty cool. But you might want to say, hey, I want to open this up a little bit, right? So, for example, we can leverage something referred to as the secure reader. So in this case, I'm going to open this CAD file, and I'll make this a little bit larger. And with a secure reader, it gives you true read-only access. So I can't copy this, I can't download it, I can't print it, etc. We also can apply dynamic watermarks with the username, date, etc., all that good stuff. And we can apply this against pretty much any type of file that's out there to really give you some additional flexibility over some of the additional out-of-the-box stuff. Now, in addition to that, again, especially if you're working with something like guest users, for example, or if you're dealing with users that internally should have access to 98% of the document, but there's some information in there like credit card data or national ID numbers or CUI data, et cetera, they should have access to. We can actually redact that data as well. So in this case, we're using the compliance module to literally go through, and anything that we find that's listed as sensitive data, we're literally stripping right out of the file. Now, we're not actually touching the file itself. We're actually pulling this out in transit. So this is what the end user sees, but we're not actually touching the file itself. So we're able to redact that information and really provide you with some additional functionality. And again, this works through Teams as well. So if this was a sensitive file, it would be redacted in that case, assuming I'm able to see that information. So let me dive very briefly back into the rules, and I'll show you kind of a quick time check as well. So the secure document rules for one, again, this allows you to specify how you want to use the secure reader. Again, in this case, anything internal or internal confidential, where the privacy check has failed, and you can add other pieces in here as well. We're forcing the secure reader. You can insert a dynamic watermark, and this can be anything like the username, date, etc. It makes it much harder to screen grab stuff and release things anonymously. And then again, apply redaction. Now, if you don't want to go quite that far, it also gives you a really handy way to leverage the native content protection as well. So RMS, encryption, etc. If you want to open files up for some additional flexibility, maybe you don't want to say, hey, this is just read only versus, I can do anything. Again, you can sort of layer these security features on using some of the out of the box sort of Microsoft tools. We give it to you a really easy way to apply these across your environment. And then I will show you, yep, that's cool. Very quickly, just some of the other types of rules. Ribbon rules. So again, it's all about shaping how the end user can interact with data. So the ribbon rules allow you to change the ribbon. You can allow or disallow various features. So if you want to say, hey, users can't download data or they can't export data to Excel, no problem. You can also, on the sharing rule side, you can tinker with this a little bit. You can change the permissions on files. And actually, we had a really neat use case from a financial customer that said, hey, we want to be able to unshare data. So they didn't want to remove data, right? So they didn't want to change the retention on the data. They wanted to unshare the data to prevent permission sprawl. So in this case, what they wanted to do was every time you throw a file into the chat, for example, hopefully you're all aware of this, but if I throw a file into the chat, it gets thrown into my OneDrive, it creates these sharing permissions for everyone else who's a member of the chat. And so what they simply wanted to do is to go through and remove those sharing permissions every 90 days, every 180 days, et cetera. So very, very easy rule to go through here and do that. And then we can leverage things like sending emails. We can have some workflows with the SIEM integration, all kinds of other good stuff. So again, really designed to give you the ability to shape how users are able to interact with your data. Again, no matter where that data is located, which is, I think, again, important in this case. Real quick, let me go through and just show you some of the data, some of the compliance pieces. There's a bunch of out-of-the-box stuff. I won't go through all of these. You're probably so familiar with many of these types, but financial information, general privacy data, HIPAA, financial data, CUI, all different types of compliance data. So again, we're able to go out and look for this data. And again, one of the great things, even if you're using another mechanism like MIP or another piece, is that we can also leverage the same functionality to find that data and redact the data from the documents as well. And then lastly, because NC Protect basically serves as a pane of glass, if you will, between the users and the data, we can also audit all of that information as well. So there's a user activity log, so you can go through and see, what people are doing. Again, you can dump this into your SIEM tool of choice, Sentinel, Splunk, etc. If you want to do some additional data aggregation for the rest of your security, you can certainly do that. We can also go through and run permission map scans. So by that, I basically mean the ability to go through and determine who has access to files and folders. Great mechanism from an audit perspective to figure out who actually has access to your files and folders. So for example, here you can see I've got an external user that has access to this offer letter. And again, if I go up here, I can sort this out pretty easily. And I can just look for anything with the ext tag, which is an external user, and see what all those external users actually have access to. So it's a pretty powerful way to go through and see what's going on within your environment. And really how effective those rails are as well. So a lot of customers like to do this early on. They like to see and get an idea as far as the types of information that is exposed to, in some cases, all users, external users, etc. It does really give you a great mechanism to see what types of data are actually out there and overexposed potentially in your organization. Having worked with a lot of clients, there's almost always stuff that is accessible to way more people than it should. So again, my personal experience, unfortunately. Let's see, what else did I miss? I think that's about it. I think I will switch back to the slides very briefly. Do kind of a quick wrap up if I didn't go through too quickly, but and again, just a real quick overview. It's relatively simple to install this product. Relatively simple to write the rules. You can see if you can write, mailbox rules in Outlook, you can probably create rules within NC Protect, and that leads to a relatively fast time to value, especially if security is a concern, leaking sensitive data is a concern, which for most people it is. And then again, it's that dynamic mechanism as well that allows us to change who and how they're able to interact with that data based on how those different attributes change. There is a slide out here with a bunch of different links as well. You can check this out. It's a bunch of different white papers and ebooks, etc. Feel free to reach out to us if I went through this. So pretty quick overview of this product. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. And speaking of which, Kevin, are there any other questions?
Indeed, Jeff. We do have some questions coming in from the audience for Jeff Melnick. Jeff, one of the questions is, again, does this require an E5 license?
It does not. So
it does not.
It does not. So E3 is no problem. Obviously, if you want to use something like MIP labels as an attribute, then you're going to need E5. So you can certainly get some additional benefit out of E5, but it's not a requirement for this product to run at all.
And how much, this is coming from Tim, how much does this tool depend on robust role-based access control versus correlating with other data points? Can you deploy it relatively flat with a relatively flat permission environment?
You can. It really depends on what the customer is looking for. So normally we look at kind of what the specific use case is for the customer, and then what are some of the sort of best practices that we can sort of umbrella over. So for example, again, with something like guest access, very easy to do that at the global level and say, hey, I don't want guests to have access to sensitive data. Any data that guests have access to, I want to lock down to the secure reader to prevent them from exfiltrating that. And then gradually adding in additional rules based on what the use cases are and what some of the other things that they're really trying to get out of the product. And I think as they get into it, they find more and more sort of use cases that they can add in and sort of layer into those different rules. Hopefully that answers your question.
All right, Jeff, we're almost out of time, but before I let you go, one last question. In your point of view, how does this all compare with the already out-of-the-box security in Microsoft 365?
So that's a great question. We actually get brought into quite a number of deals with Microsoft. They actually bring us in to fill in some of their gaps. So obviously the idea of attribute-based access control is critical. They're starting to kind of dip their toe into it, but they can't offer the granularity that we can. Because I can do something very easy around something like nationality. So if you're dealing with ITAR, for example, very easy to say, hey, depending on your nationality, you don't have access to these files. The redaction is a big piece, and then really the watermarking and labeling is a huge piece for those guys as well, especially in the defense side and the government.
Very good. That is Jeff Melnick, Director of Technical Solutions at Arctis. Jeff, thank you so much for being a part of our event today.
Hey, thank you, Kevin. Appreciate it.
All right, very good. Well, I hope you are enjoying this discussion today, really looking at best practices with Microsoft 365. Which brings us to our next guest experts today. Joe and Constantine, are you with us?
Certainly are, Kevin.
Hello, gentlemen. Let us formally introduce Joe LeBay, Vice President of Product Management at Knowledge Lake, and Constantine Echt, a systems engineer at Knowledge Lake. Both of them are here to join us to talk about using Microsoft 365 as a foundation for intelligent document processing. So gentlemen, please take it away and tell us more.
Sure. Well, thank you, Kevin. Thanks for having us, and thank you everybody for participating today. As Kevin said, we're going to be talking about using Microsoft 365 as a basis, or what I would call a foundational service for intelligent document processing. In my opinion, and I've been watching the previous speakers, it seems like there's a consensus on this, that M365 has certainly become the de facto standard operating system for collaboration. And there are plenty of competitors in the collaboration workspace market like Slack and Asana, Huddle, et cetera. But for my money, the Microsoft stack, and primarily I'm talking about the Office apps, Teams, SharePoint, it's the predominant way organizations are commuting and collaborating today. So, and then you throw in offerings from Microsoft like Power Automate or SharePoint Syntax and Azure Cognitive Services. And it's clear that Microsoft is also becoming a force in the higher volume transaction processing use cases as well. In other words, Microsoft is not only participating in creating the transactions that represent the lifeblood of our organizations, but they're also now helping to facilitate and integrate and document those transactions. However, and there's always a but, despite the fact that M365 is evolving into the way business is transacted, organizations still continue to spend large amounts of money replicating certain services via point solutions that I would argue should really be a shared service. And when I say point solutions, I'm talking about the line of business systems that we use every day. Think about the applications you use. And for example, probably most of them have a document management capability built in, or they have a workflow capability built in. And these are services that should be provided as a shared service or an infrastructure service that all the point solutions use rather than replicating them, because replicating them is expensive and it's hard to support, and it contributes to the document chaos that probably most organizations experience. So I would contend that organizations should leverage the M365 platform that they already have to help facilitate intelligent document processing. And that's regardless of whether you decide you want to build onto the platform directly, or whether you want to implement a solution from a vendor like Knowledge Lake, who's already built IDP services on top of that stack. But regardless of the way you go, building on that stack should be the strategy, in my opinion, when it comes to IDP. So speaking of building on IDP on the M365 platform, that's what we've done at Knowledge Lake, and that's what we're going to take a deeper dive into today. Constantine, next slide, please. So what is Knowledge Lake and what does it do? Well, it is a collection of intelligent processing, automation, and storage services that leverages the best parts of the Microsoft stack, and frankly, supplements some of the parts where the stack might be a little bit weak. And the platform is divided up into 3 collections of services, or what we call internally pillars of services: intelligent capture, automation and workflow, and data and document management access. And I'll briefly touch on all of those. Intelligent capture starts with an ability to bring all of your documents, whether they're created internally or they come from the outside world, through a centralized hub where those documents can then be processed in a unified way. And so having a facility that handles omni-channel capture, meaning any document, any type of document, any format, wherever it comes from, we need to make sure that we can accommodate the ingestion of those documents in order to be able to process them in a unified way. And that includes, and you'll see this in the demo that Constantine is going to do, the tight integration that we have with the Office products through a plugin. Once the documents are received into this central hub, we can then utilize technologies like machine learning or OCR or any one of the Azure Cognitive Services capabilities that come into play here to be able to, first of all, auto categorize or auto classify a document, meaning based on having seen a sample of this document before, or an example of it before, I can identify it automatically and I can say, I know what this document is. Once I'm able to classify it, I then know where to find information that I need on that document for the purposes of facilitating the transaction that it represents. So intelligent capture gets me the documents, no matter where they come from, whatever format, gives me the ability to classify them, the ability to extract the information from them so that I can now pass it to the next pillar of services, automate and workflow, which is all about putting documents and data in front of the people who need it when they need it, and into the systems that are needed again to facilitate processing the transaction the document represents. So we're talking about technologies like API level integrations, RPA, specifically Power Automate on the Microsoft platform. So if you're standardizing on Power Automate as your workflow tool, you should be able to then from that tool reach out to things like something you're going to see in a minute called Knowledge Lake Tasks, which acts as the user interface for when the workflow needs additional information about the document, or it needs some routing rules that need to be defined on the fly by somebody. And then finally, when the transaction comes to rest, it needs to be stored in a central repository that is obviously secure, giving universal access to anyone who has the privilege to see those documents, no matter where they reside. And something that you're going to see that's an interesting capability, one-click contextual access via the Knowledge Lake magic button, meaning from any application screen, by clicking this button, you can actually pull up all the documents in the repository that are relevant to that context. What customer am I looking at? What am I looking at an invoice? Whatever it is, you don't have to go and regenerate the search, and we'll take a look at that. So all of the services that we provide are geared towards facilitating the transaction that a document represents, basically making the process faster, better, and with an ability to repurpose those documents for whatever they're needed, whether it be for records management or compliant purposes or downstream analysis. So that's the platform in a nutshell. I'm going to turn it over to Constantine now, who's going to go through a little bit more detailed demonstration.
Perfect. Thanks, Joe. So really what I want to show you is kind of bits and pieces of those three pillars that Joe spoke about, just to kind of give you an overview of what's available and what's possible within our platform. So I'm starting here in Outlook, and part of that first pillar is really being able to capture content as it's flowing through. Obviously, if you're leveraging SharePoint, you can always go to SharePoint directly, navigate through the different sites, libraries, and find where you want to deposit the documents. But we try to make that part of it easier. So by integrating with things like Outlook, or if you're creating content with Word, Excel, PowerPoint, we have these add-ins that allow you to send the email directly to the correct location within SharePoint with minimal involvement from the user. So you can say I want to send the original email or send the attachment in itself. And this little add-in here is available to you whether you're working at this level or whether or not you're in the document itself. To view it, you can click the upload button and be able to ingest this document directly from here. What you're seeing here on the right-hand side, so we have a direct link to SharePoint. So as the taxonomy changes and grows in the organization, we inherit those changes. We inherit the security permissions. So as a user, I'm able to see the content types that I have permissions to within SharePoint and visualize them here with the fields, the columns that would be visible to me in SharePoint. So I can perform any kind of indexing if I wanted to, or I can release this and let the backend system handle the indexing for me where applicable. And really all I'm doing in this case is dictating that this document needs to be sent to SharePoint or Azure or wherever, and go from there. We also have the ability to monitor inboxes as a whole. So for use cases where you have a dedicated inbox for invoices or applications or vendor documents, we can monitor that inbox. As new documents come in, automatically bring those in, really to eliminate the need for users to have to monitor it and manually move documents from around from place to place. Once the documents are in, then it's a matter of really minimizing the amount of time that a user has to spend dealing with each of these documents. What you're seeing now is I had a mixed batch of documents come through. We were automatically able to classify and extract the relevant data. We can leverage things like database lookups or SharePoint lists to perform dropdowns and auto indexing. That's a live connection, so it'll re-index it on the fly as I make my selections. Obviously, things like barcode reading, signature detection is what's part of the platform itself. But here, from a user point of view, I can quickly get a snapshot that most of the documents have been fully indexed. I don't need to worry about any of them, and really only get involved if there are any exceptions that you're seeing here where there's a field that can't be extracted because of obviously the quality of the document itself. And now I can go in here and manually make my updates. Once again, leveraging things like SharePoint lists if I needed to for auto indexing or source validation to bring this content in. So all that's available to you. This is really meant to serve as the exception queue, not to be spending your entire time here, but this is what that user interface looks like if I need to get involved. If there needs to be additional involvement, as Joe mentioned, where, for instance, I'll use this document example where this document, I could tell this invoice is over $10,000. Perhaps it needs additional levels of approvals. What we're able to do, and here's where tasks come into place, is either have this self-contained or be fed through Power Automate on the SharePoint side once the document is released, and provide a UI to the user. The way you're seeing it on the screen right now is just the way that I built this out. All of these individual pieces of the image preview, the properties, as well as the Q&A section, all of this could be customizable, moved around, resized. The questions could be called something else. So we give you the flexibility to really make the user experience as simplified as possible. And now I can go in here and make my approval or reject it, say why or why not, I don't feel like it, and then have my completion of the approval process. And all of these questions could be mapped back to different fields and different columns within SharePoint, so that all of this gets logged and can be fed into a reporting database or reporting source like Power BI to be able to have live statistics on what's going on. One thing that I didn't mention on the back end that I just want to kind of go back to for a bit is in this section here, we do give you the ability to visualize where we're picking the information from. So if you have a very large document that's being processed, you could turn on the snippets to see what the system is looking at, so that instead of having to go from page to page finding what it should have been in case there's an exception, just turn on the snippets and you can easily make your fix from there. Once all of this is done, it goes through any kind of workflow approval as needed. Then it's really about giving the user the most simplified way to be able to find the documents that they are looking for. There's a couple of ways that we can do that. I know Joe mentioned earlier the magic button. So that's where I'll start because it sounds magical. What that really is as I am a user maneuvering through an application, in this case, I'm using Business Central as an example, this little icon up here popped up. So what this icon is doing, it's actually giving me that contextual access to the application. So I don't need to have any tight integration with Business Central dynamics. I don't need to write any API stuff. There's not much that I really have to do. I could do this with any application, whether it's web-based or any legacy things that were homegrown. And what this does is it monitors the screen, knows what's on here. And if I want to find related documents to associated insurance, I can simply come here, click the button, it grabs the information from that page, passes along to the knowledge lake search. We can leverage the metadata to find the information that I'm looking for. And now it gives me back my results where here is my invoice, my purchase order, and a non-PO invoice for this particular vendor. So even if in my SharePoint environment, I have separate libraries that hold these different documents, this does a search across my accounting site and gives me back my information, once again, based on the permissions that I have as a user. Perhaps if I had a larger role, when I search for this vendor, maybe I'll find the vendor agreement and something else based on my permissions within SharePoint. but since I'm an end user, I'm getting just these documents that are available to me. Once I'm accessing these documents, I have the ability to interact with them from here. And one thing I'm not sure if you noticed, when I clicked on that button, it was said streaming from SharePoint Online. So at no point in time are we actually holding on to your documents. Everything is stored securely under your permissions within SharePoint. We are simply providing you an interface to be able to access these documents. So our viewers supports about 120 different extensions, to where if you have things like CAD drawings or other things that perhaps a user wants to view them, but doesn't have that software loaded on their machine, they're able to leverage our viewer to have access to all of these types of documents. And then depending on their permissions, you can search for keywords within this document, edit the document, edit the metadata, copy, download, print, or delete. And once again, all of this is driven by permissions. I can also click forward to other documents that are in a search result, or go back to my original. And lastly, you get the added benefit of having things like annotations, where you can add an image layer up above for things like highlighting, add your own stamps directly into here to have them go from it. So the image is still, the document is still stored in SharePoint. It still has all the security permissions that are there. It is untouched. And this is purely an image layer that is stored to give you additional information for this document as I'm interacting with it, but we're not changing the policy of the document itself. And this search is accessible directly from our platform as well. So if I'm on the homepage of our platform, for instance, and I want to be able to go to search, based on my permissions, I'll have different searches that are visible for me. And then I can run a search for based on the metadata that I am applying. So if I want to look for a record for a particular employee, I can get my results back. I can group them together based on those different content types, or I can group it based on other factors and have my information here available to me. So all these documents are still in SharePoint. They're still under your security policy. We're just trying to give you an easier way to interact with them to minimize the amount of time you have to go browsing for these documents. I'm gonna pause here. Joe, was there anything that you wanted me to show that I haven't yet? I know I kind of went through pretty quickly.
No, I think you're good. I think you hit on all the high notes. The takeaway here is that, like, for example, with the repository, we're hitting a Microsoft-based repository. So the collection of documents and metadata is all in a central location. So not only can we access it, but obviously the Microsoft tooling and a robust market of third-party tools that might be integrated as well that you might want to use for records management or other things will have access to the same data set.
Yep, and just let you know, all that information that flows through, we are able to provide that back to you folks. So if you want to use something like Power BI to surface that information in a meaningful way, these are just some of the reports that you could build out by getting the information back from us and build these dashboards that are relevant for you to make business decisions within your organization. Joe, were there any questions that were asked that we want to address, or Kevin, is there anything else on your end?
All right, very good. Thank you so much, Constantine and Joe. That is Joe LeBay and Constantine Eck from Knowledge Lake. We would like to open it up for any questions that you might have for Joe and Constantine now. Let's take advantage of their expertise. And I have a question about, let me bring it up here. I had a question as you were talking. What applications can I embed in the Knowledge Lake magic button? And how can I configure it to do things other than search?
That's a great question. And I think it ties into Mason's question as well about where does the AI and RPA come from? The Knowledge Lake platform has a full-blown RPA and RDA. When I say RDA, I mean robotic desktop automation, which is that magic button that you've seen, is under the hood. However, because our platform is consumed on can be consumed on a component basis, if you decide that for whatever reason you want to use the Microsoft tooling, Power Automate Desktop, you're free to do that. Certainly, I'm biased in terms of our capabilities, but it is a full-blown RPA, RDA capability. So although most of our customers initially start using our RPA capability within the context of documents, meaning how can I go and gather additional information about this document? How can I jump to a document from a line of business application? There really is no limitation as to what you can automate within that platform. It's a low-code, no-code development environment, so you're free to do whatever you need to do. But again, if you decide you want to use the Microsoft offering, or frankly, even a third-party offering, you're free to do that and still take advantage of all the other capabilities that the platform has.
This question from Quinn: can you merge the image later in the event the documents need to be migrated to future systems?
Yes, that's a very good question. So by design, they are stored separate, so we don't alter the document itself. You have the ability to embed the image layer if you want to print or download the document free individually. If you were to have a migration where you wanted to move off of SharePoint somewhere else and you want to maintain that, there would need to be some scripting on the back end to hit the SQL database where the image layer is stored, open up the document and merge the two. So though it's not something that is out of the box, it is possible in case it is needed. But our default strategy is try to maintain those documents in their original format as a record and keep the layers separate.
If I don't have a preference for a repository, which repository do you recommend, or does it matter?
That's a good question. We get that question all the time. Someone will come through, a client will say, well, we've got SharePoint on-prem. Right. Should we go to SharePoint Online? Should we potentially use Azure Cloud Services? And, my opinion is that both scale really well. They will both continue to be evolved. And when I say both, I'm talking about SharePoint Online and Azure Cloud Services. You might run into some file size issues with SPO, but those are kind of edge cases. Same thing with regard to list restrictions. I think it comes down mostly to cost. What is your M365 subscription afford you? Meaning, did you buy enough seats to get enough storage to support your document management requirements, or you're going to have to buy premium storage? But I think the most important factor for me is, and I kind of touched on it a little bit before, and that is that robust third-party product, a collection of add-ons and products. So with regard to Azure, if you want to use Azure as your storage mechanism, that's great. Functions great. We've created an interface for it. But if there's any other kind of functions you want around it, if it doesn't exist, you're going to have to build it. Whereas with SPO, there's a good chance that somebody's already built something that you might need. I mean, we saw a couple of products today. We saw Cadence, we saw the security product. These are things that you could add right onto the product itself if you need. Whereas in the Azure world, and this might be just a point in time issue, the third-party ecosystem is not as robust. So if I were a records management person making this decision, I think I'd lean towards SPO because of these additional products that are available to me.
We have been speaking with Joe LeBay and Constantine Eck from Knowledge Lake. Gentlemen, we're almost out of time, but before I let you go, one last question. Why would I use Knowledge Lake search instead of SharePoint's native search engine?
That's another good question. There's no reason why you can't use either or both. In fact, we have a number of clients who say we've got a number of users that are comfortable with the existing knowledge, with the existing SharePoint interface, and they want to continue to use that. So if I bring in something like Knowledge Lake, does that break that user model? And the answer is no. You can use both. However, if you take a look at the demo that Constantine did, the ability to easily do metadata search, full text search, virtual document paging, which I think is a great feature, sorting and grouping, ease of export and printing, API support, and of course that magic button, one-click access. To me, that makes it a no-brainer as to what's the better search experience. However, we don't force you to use our search if you decide not to, but I think it becomes obvious it's a better way to go.
That is Joe LeBay, Vice President of Product Management for Knowledge Lake. Joining him is Constantine Eck, Systems Engineer at Knowledge Lake. Joe, Constantine, thank you so much for being a part of our event today.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you,
Appreciate
Kevin.
it.
All right, very good. Great discussion here. And we are moving on to our next guest expert today, Scott Francis. Scott, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Hello, Scott. Welcome back. It's great to speak with you again. Let us formally introduce and welcome Scott Francis, technology evangelist from Fujitsu. Scott is here to talk about the best practices for document scanning in the Microsoft 365 platform. So Scott, please tell us more.
Kevin, thank you very much. And I'd like to thank everyone for taking time out of their day to attend today's webcast. So I'm excited to talk about our Fujitsu document scanners. We are the paper to digital on-ramp. And many of you on today's webcast already have Fujitsu scanners. We are continuing to come out with new products and new technology. And part of that is all about supporting Microsoft 365. So with that, I'm going to jump into our presentation. Now, of course, foreign digital paper processes are becoming more prevalent, but there's still a lot of paper coming into your organization. And of course, customers want to work with you the way they want to work with you, and there's still paper coming into the organization, and paper is still being produced in your organization as well. And many of you out there still have paper storage. And as you are reconsidering your headquarter office footprint space and how you support your remote workers, digital transformation and document scanning is more important than ever. And Microsoft 365 is a great way to house and manage that content and make it securely accessible to all of your employees and your customers and your business partners wherever they are and whenever they need it. And also, in this day and age of ransomware viruses and other calamities that can shut down a network, being able to still do business, being able to still provide care and healthcare with paper-based processes as a backup is still a viable solution. So still many great solutions for paper and the requirement to scan them. And by the way, all of the latest studies show that the amount of paper created in business is still going up. So for those of you who do have document scanners, or you're simply scanning documents with other types of technologies, our latest document scanning platform really is the best of all worlds. And what I mean by that is that our latest scanners are FI 8170. It's based on our FI 7160 that sold over 1 million units in North America alone over the last 9 years. The new 8170 is able to perform in a legacy environment the way that you've always used it, but it can now also perform in a cloud environment, and it has unique capabilities to scan into Microsoft 365. Now, for your users, all they're going to really notice is just amazing performance. I'll talk for a couple of minutes today about the features and technologies inside, but at the end of the day, it's just about amazing performance. And our products are built like tanks and they last forever. We routinely have customers. We were at the AIIM conference back in April. We had customers, including you, who came up and said, we've been using the same scanner for over 10 years. It's not uncommon. And we're all about ease of use. And that really is the magic about how we work with Microsoft 365. We are able to seamlessly scan in a very easy and fast way that does not require training. And I'll demonstrate that in a flow chart in just a couple of slides. It really is the best overall value. And our latest platform has 32 unique patents. So if you didn't think that document scanners could still innovate, here we go with our latest platform, over 32 new patents that really drive the performance of this scanner. So when we talk about scanning into Microsoft 365, it's got to be fast, it's got to be easy, and it's got to be automatic. In order to have automatic scanning, we need a lot of intelligent features that just work. So the user doesn't have to enable them. The user doesn't even have to know they exist. So our clear image capture technology is a brand new camera technology that is able to accurately capture the fidelity of the document the first time that it's scanned. And that's really important because we don't want to take time to rescan documents. One of our patents is our new automatic separation feature. This uses sensors to dynamically detect the amount of documents in the doc feeder, and then it can adjust the scanner's feeding force level based on that amount of paper. For the user, it just means that the scanner is going to scan without paper jams. And you can even scan exception documents. You can scan passports, folded documents, envelopes. This is a great way to scan exception documents so your employees don't have to go find a different way to capture them. Everything can go through the scanner. And our all-wheel drive, another one of our unique characteristics of the new scanner, actually uses motors to drive the front and back rollers, including the rollers along the feed path. It truly is four-wheel drive, and again, this just delivers excellent paper handling. Anytime your capture device jams, it really stops up the process and it turns off your employees from wanting to scan documents. Our paper handling and image quality make it easy. And part of that's our skew reducing capabilities. We can independently operate the left and right pick sensors to make sure documents are fed through accurately. And there's more. Our sonic paper protection technology actually listens for the sound of a paper jam starting to occur, and we stop the process before damage is done. Sometimes users will put a stapled stack of paper into the scanner that normally would cause a lot of tearing. We can prevent that from happening. Or they might load the document incorrectly at a very wide skew. We'll detect that as well, and we'll protect that paper. And with our overscan control, if a document's skewed, it may miss the paper sensor. Most scanners just have a single paper sensor in the middle. We've got 3, and that allows us to detect the document and to scan the entire document. And our ultrasonic double feed detection intelligently captures errors if 2 documents go into the scanner at the same time. But if we're scanning a card or a document with a barcode sticker like in healthcare, we can scan that reliably. The bottom line is that we capture the documents correctly the first time and every time. We capture the whole document and capture all the details. So when you're scanning into Microsoft 365, there's no QA process. There's just a reliable, fast, easy capture of documents directly into Microsoft 365. And we even have an ADF stacker supporter, because when you scan documents, you still have to do something with the paper after the fact. Our stacker supporter neatly stacks them. So when we talk about Microsoft 365, our scanning solutions really work with all the solutions you've seen on today's webcast, but we have a unique native integration into Microsoft 365 that makes it fast and easy for you and your employees to scan into SharePoint, Teams, Outlook, OneDrive, even Azure Blob Storage. So here in this example, the FI8170 is connected to the network, and we're not using a PC because interacting with the scanner through PC software takes time, it's complicated, and it adds extra costs not only for support, but you also have to pay for the PCs, the deployment of the PCs, etc. So the new FI8170 can connect right to the network. Users walk up and they load their documents. They can press any button on the scanner, and the scanner is going to reach out to the server and it's going to download the job buttons in real time. The server is used to control multiple scanners, and that server could be running on premise, it could be running in the cloud, it could be running in Azure. So in this example, there are different job groups and job buttons where the user can select that scanning. Every single job button can be tied into a different SharePoint library, it can be tied into Teams, it can be tied into a OneDrive folder, or to an Outlook email address. And you can have multiple job buttons. So you can have multiple sites, multiple libraries, etc. From there, they're going to select that job button and press the scan button. It's that easy. This is critical because part of the challenge of managing all of your paper content is getting your employees to scan those documents. They're busy. They have a day job. We solve that problem. By making the scanning experience fast and easy, it's much more viable for your employees to do. They can select that job button and the documents are directly scanned to our PaperStream NX Manager server. And again, that one server can control over 100 scanners in multiple locations. Once the images are scanned, we use our PaperStream IP image enhancement to make those images searchable. And we can enhance the image so that OCR or ICR recognition is going to be highly accurate, which is critical to drive all of those AI-based workflows after the process. We support full text searchable PDFs right within our server at no additional cost, by the way, and those can go right to a network location or a cloud location. If you're using a legacy content management system and you want to watch a folder and bring those documents in, no problem. But we also offer over 30 integrations as well. And the best integrations are with Microsoft 365. So as I just briefly mentioned, you can scan into any portion of Microsoft 365 in a single step. There's no requirement to scan it to email and then detach the file and put it into the right SharePoint library. You can scan directly from the scanner into that SharePoint library in a single step with all of the intelligence and automation, so there's no manual processing required along the way. We're using full SSL security, so the image data is safe. Once it's in SharePoint, SharePoint Syntax is emerging as a great AI tool to not only do recognition and extraction, but now we can drive workflows with Power Automate. We can use SharePoint Syntax to look at data lakes of information and come up with AI-based classification for those documents in those libraries. So SharePoint Syntax is a very powerful tool. And the best part, it keeps getting more intelligent by the hour. So this is a great tool not only today, but also driving into the future. What does this mean? It means we're going to decrease our costs. We're going to accelerate that paper to digital process. And because we can do this in the cloud, we're going to reduce your IT requirements. Here's an example of a company with multiple locations. These are auto service facilities. We can deploy these scanners without going on site because we're just connecting them to power and connecting them physically to the network with a cable. Here's the configuration. The scanners are connected directly to the gateway. And then from there, an IT administrator can actually register all of those scanners and develop those SharePoint, Teams, OneDrive, Outlook profiles from any location on the network. Once that's done, those scanners are ready to be used. Customers walk in this case, they're signing statements of work. Those images are now being converted to searchable PDF as they go through our server process. So the images come over to the server, they're enhanced for image quality, they're made fully searchable, and then from there, they're transferred directly into Microsoft 365. And that's it for capture. From there, they're in SharePoint. They're in Microsoft 365. Employees can now access those images from the headquarter office. And of course, if they need those images in the locations as well, now they're fully accessible. All the collaboration with teams is ready to go. It's that simple. There's a lot of sophistication in technology, but we make it easy. And for your SharePoint administrator, your Microsoft administrator, this is easy to do. It's not low code, it's no code. It's drag and drop. It's simply just entering some key information as we create the job profiles. And by the way, when you change a job profile, there's no updates, there's no pushing out new builds. It's instantly accessible the next time the scanner talks to the network. And by the way, this is standard functionality with our new scanners. Use them with Twain and ISIS drivers, or get rid of that PC, connect them to the network, connect them to the cloud. We also have our FI7300NX, which builds on that with unique user authentication. We have an NFC card reader. You can now use Azure Active Directory or Active Directory if you're on premise to authenticate the user, and then they can see their own job buttons unique to them. And there's a full chain of custody that follows those documents. And we've got wireless, so it's even easier to place, and a color touchscreen display. And it can be used with your server on-prem or in the cloud. Or if you'd like, we have Edge Experience, which is our own SharePoint as a service. So this is that NX Manager in a server on the Azure Marketplace. So now you can use our server and our service to scan right into your Microsoft 365. Both options are available. As I close this out, I just want to talk about image enhancement. It's all about making the text searchable. We have a number of algorithms that can actually take difficult documents and make that text accessible so it can have a full text searchability, which is critical for everything that goes downstream. We've got a great series of scanners. We've got a solution for you. And we also have a trade-in program. So if you have existing scanners or other types of capture equipment, we'd be happy to trade those in. We use a responsible IT recycler, and you can get a credit towards buying new scanners and service from Fujitsu. How to move forward. Here's our contact information. I'm Scott Francis. We'd be happy to come on site and do a scanner demonstration, show you how easy it is to scan into your Microsoft 365. Kevin, I'm going to send it back to you for any questions.
Very good. That is Scott Francis, technology evangelist at Fujitsu. Scott, we do have some questions coming in. Mason, again, thank you for your questions today. Mason is asking, is it possible to use a mobile app to control the scanners and connect with NX Manager?
And the answer is yes. So you can use a mobile device to actually control the server, set up accounts. You can make job profiles. So anything in terms of administration you can do on any browser-based device. But to address the question at a higher level, we have a toolkit that would allow you to create a mobile app that will allow you to actually interact with the scanner from a mobile app. So you could actually scan directly into Microsoft through a mobile app as well.
Another question coming in, again from Quinn. Thank you, Quinn, for your participation today. The question is, does Fujitsu offer a cloud-based PaperStream server in a software as a service subscription-based model?
We do. On the Azure Marketplace, we have, it's called Edge Experience. And this essentially allows you to have all the functionality I just talked about without having to stand up a server on your own. So you can subscribe to Edge Experience. It's $70 a month for 25,000 images. You can also subscribe to our FI7300NX, so hardware as a service, for $60 a month. For $130 a month, you can have a scanner and a hosted server, and you can be up in about an hour.
And Scott, what about customers who are still using an on-premise solution but would like to move to the cloud and Microsoft 365 in the near future? Do you have a solution for them?
Great question, Kevin. The answer is yes. So our FI 8170 and the FI 7300 NX can be used in legacy environments. We have a great Twain and ISIS driver, so they can use the scanner the way they always have. When they're ready to go to the cloud, they can just untether that PC, connect it directly to the network, and get all of this functionality. So these scanners really are future-proofed with this type of capability.
Well, the server-based scanning approach is a very interesting concept, but a lot of companies, especially small and mid-sized businesses, may or may not have a great deal of IT staff or capabilities to implement a server. Is there a solution for them?
Yes, and the answer is yes. And really, Edge Experience is available for businesses of all sizes, but it's really perfectly positioned for small businesses, Kevin, to your point, who may not have IT resources. With Edge Experience, they can lease the scanner and the server, and the setup is very easy. It takes about an hour to stand up or less, and they're ready to go. So we've got a great solution for small businesses. For enterprise businesses that want complete control, they can have that as well. They can put it on their own premise. They can put it into their private cloud, or they can use our public cloud.
Very good. That is Scott Francis, technology evangelist at Fujitsu. Scott, thank you so much for being a part of our event today.
Thank you, Kevin.
All right, very good. Well, we've had a great discussion today, but we have one final guest expert that I'd like to bring on board. That is Shuard Alkema. Shuard, are you with us?
I'm with you. Thank you.
Hello and welcome aboard. Very good. Let us formally welcome Shuard Alkema. He is the Director of Content Services for Zilio, here to talk about viewing content migrations as an opportunity to improve the use of Microsoft 365 and really get the most out of the platform. Shuard, tell us more.
Yes, thank you. I will, Kevin. Let me share my screen. So thank you for the introduction. Indeed, getting the most value out of your Microsoft 365 implementation, we think, as Xilio, that it's important to, sorry, let me first start to introduce myself, although it was already done by Kevin. I'm heading our content services organization with Xilio. So Xilio is heavily focused and also has its background in content migrations. However, we see that we have a content services practice and that we deliver actually within the content services area because we think that it's when you do migrations, you can do more than just migrations, and you should. And I'll talk about that a little bit. So of course, we're here discussing to get the most value out of your Microsoft 365 implementation. We, as Xilio, think it all starts with content, right? So it's your environment is nothing without content. With the right content, the relevant content, cleaned content. If you migrate from another system, it needs to be correctly governed. So why don't you take care of that while you are migrating? As you are touching everything, as you are anyway analyzing everything, as you are moving it, why don't you clean it up? So that's really our vision. So as Kevin pointed out, we see a content migration as an opportunity, really an opportunity to improve your landscape, to improve your information management, and really take it to the next level while also going to the next environment, your Microsoft 365 implementation. So here, I'll discuss how we make sure they are not those headache projects that maybe you've heard of. I'll specifically go into compliant migrations. That's really what we are known for, also within Microsoft, the complicated compliant migrations, the old ECM suites, and you want to move them to Microsoft 365, then we really have the experience and understanding of how to do it. So in this presentation, I want to talk to you a little bit about the challenges that we see with our customers, the solutions that we have put together, we and our partners, for those challenges, our platform and our approach. It's very intertwined, but I'll talk about that, and a few examples about how in practice our customers, our partners' customers, really took that opportunity to improve their information management while migrating. Then I'll talk about Xilio for a little bit and how to contact us if you would like after seeing this migration. No, not a migration, presentation. Well, I'm just full of it, you know. So our challenges, the challenges that we see with our customers. One of the biggest ones, and it's always like that when we come in to run a migration, it's access, and it's really the understanding of the content. So we're specialized in these legacy migrations. So we connect to the legacy repositories. Access is most of the times, no, it's sometimes an issue, but mostly understanding the data. What's really in that system? No one has really used it anymore. We know we need to really still keep it, especially within a regulatory environment. But yeah, nobody really knows. So we have created a solution for that to really visualize everything and make sure you make the right decisions. Another big challenge is unifying your information models, unifying and consolidating them. Many times, especially within government here in the Netherlands, but also in the UK, they're cutting costs by merging, and they've all have their different systems, and they need to be consolidated into one. Just a different implementation, just a different information model, although they should be similar. We still see a lot of differences, and the same within large organizations where different departments have different systems. So this is a big challenge. Another one we see is metadata quality. So a system was not set up really well. It was used poorly. We're unsure of the quality. It wasn't enforced the right way. So how do we make sure it's complete? It's the right quality. How do we enforce the right retention labels, etc. on it when we're not sure of that? So this is something we typically also take care of. Then broken links. It's an interesting one, I think. So say you have built up your other system, like knowledge management system, intranet, with links to your ECM suite. Then after you migrate, they break. And that could be an issue because you don't know where all those links are. So there's a solution for that, which we recently updated, and I think it's a very interesting one. Then another challenge a lot of our customers have: information governance. It wasn't really in place in the old systems. We like to start with a good setup. So how, also from a migration perspective, how do I now set the right policies and retention rules, and how do I make sure that's really set up correctly? And the other way around, information governance has been set up really well, and then now I'm going to Microsoft 365. I mean, I have this old open text system. I know it's work. Our users don't want to use it, but I know it enforces everything the right way. How do I make sure it's still all right in Microsoft 365? That's one of the challenges we actually also encounter quite a lot recently, because of course a lot is happening there on Compliance Center and Purview, and yeah, that's a big question. Then another one, I want to move out the archive. I'm not yet ready with my Microsoft 365 implementation. Can you still help? Well, also for that, we and also our partners, because they do a lot of these projects as well, created a solution. So in short, on our solutions, we've created a data visualization solution that part of our migration flow. We'll talk about it later a bit in the architecture. It allows you to really discover your data and to make sure you make the right decisions. Then another focus of ours is compliant migrations. So migration of records, migration of policies, data enrichment, making sure you have a full audit trail of that all migration. That's really something that we deliver, focused on because of our experience with certain customers, but it's really something that we're well known for. Then the link redirector. It does what it says. It redirects the links. It makes sure that if you have that situation that you have links pointing to your old ECM repository and you're migrating away, that the links will still work. So it just will capture, because we are migrating. We know where the document was. We know where it goes. So we have that in a way already known in our database, and we just point the link to the correct new location. It's a really, I think, elegant solution to make sure you still have all that information that you're looking for in your other environments, pointing to those old sources still with you. We have created also an archive solution, a compliant archive solution. We have encountered many situations where the source was not fully set up yet, or was unsure what it was really going to be even. However, the choice was made and the applications was to the source application, so where it needed to be migrated from was too old, was end of life, was a risk, was not being used anymore correctly, so it just needed to move out. So this in-between archive solution is then something to use while you set up the actual target and still migrate into it. If it's really an archive, then that's a good solution to use. Then around all these software solutions and projects that we do with it, we noticed, and we have a lot of partners for that as well, that information management services were so much intertwined with migrations, especially into Microsoft 365, and especially when migrating compliant environments into Microsoft 365, that we, through also a partner network, developed these services around it, understanding Compliance Center or Purview, understanding Viva, and also Syntax, as also presented before me. Then I wanted to show you a overview of our platform. And as I said, it's really intertwined with our approach. So every migration is basically an ETL process. We think, however, it's very important to also discover and analyze what you're gonna do before you do a transformation. So it's extract, discover, transform, and load. And we created a couple of applications for that. One of them is Insights. That's really the visualization tool. How does your data look in the different sources? Do you have duplicates? Do you have metadata that's used incorrectly? All kinds of patterns that are shown, which allows you to make the right decisions. The decisions, how you're going to do your migration, they are built in the migration builder. It's a flexible environment that you can always open the hood and do some scripting, because we think when you do these types of migrations, then you need the flexibility. I mean, there are brilliant tools out there that will guide you through a one-to-one, a file share to SharePoint, or SharePoint to SharePoint migration. However, if you want to migrate these old legacy systems and a multitude of them, also including a file share, and maybe there's also an old SharePoint environment around that you also want to compare, then you just need flexibility. That's what we found out, and that's what works well with this. We have a basic search component as well, because when doing large phased migrations, we feel there's a need also to have a search on what's happening within the migration. And it's basically also that archive that I was discussing about. So that's twofold. We store everything in our unified data model. So that's where Insights runs on. That's where all the migration rules are built on. That's where actually the transformations happen. And that's also, at least the target part of it, that's also what supposedly you could search on when you have this archive solution. However, a migration usually will make sure you migrate. So we migrate into Microsoft 365, migrate into Azure Blob Storage. We have this archive solution that also runs on that. And part of the migration also is the migration audit trail. So that adds to our compliant migration. You have always full transparency of whatever happened within your migration. That's also the reporting layer. You can always dive into all the reports that were created in every step of the way. And I talked about link redirector already. That's an additional service that allows you to keep links alive, so that with doing a migration, we want to make sure that we have everything that's part of it, that's been integrated with your source system, that you just have no headaches doing these migrations. All right. So a couple of examples of these migrations that we've done. One of them was in Euronext. It's an organization in Europe covering a lot of finance. So they had two different Documentum instances. They wanted to move them into Microsoft 365. They were really different because they were from a merger. So the only things the same was that actually it was Documentum. So we ran a discovery. We consolidated all the permissions, all the metadata. We made sure of a mapping of these permissions. That was actually one of the challenges because they wanted unique permissions, and that's not something you probably want to do within SharePoint. At least there's a limit to it. We were setting in-place records also upon migration. So they were actually what they were originally in Documentum, and we provided them some information governance advice around it, which was not really part of the scope at the beginning, but they found out that was just needed, and that's what we encounter a lot. Then quite a large migration from one of the old ECM legacy systems. It was 240 terabytes, and it was migrated into Microsoft 365 and a Azure archive solution. So here we really made sure we had a cold and active content split, and had that also as part of a process. So continuously, also after the migration, something becomes called again and will again move into the archive. Which was an Azure archive solution, which was really something additional, again, to make sure they benefited the most from this migration. So we didn't just put it all into SharePoint. No, we really made sure it was as efficient as possible for Mott MacDonald. Then the FCA, we're moving from OpenText Live. We have moved from OpenText Live-Link into Microsoft 365. It was highly confidential information. Here, it was really important to have that audit trail as part of a migration, also still present within the file. So there was a solution for that where it's part of the context within SharePoint. You never lose any track of what happened with the document, also in the old Live-Link system. Here we had through our insights and mapping module, we had a lot of interactivity with users for enrichment and for mapping. So it's not always done based on just some rules. You can do it, but you can also put it in front of a user and have them create the input that the tool then again reads. Let me look at the time. Okay. So that's about Xilio. So a little bit more about Xilio. We were founded in 2004, and since then we've already been doing migrations. So we've done a lot. We created connectors for them. We have been focusing strongly on Microsoft. So we have been a content services charter partner for quite a while. We have been a Viva launch partner. We see that all these additional services and understanding of the Microsoft environment really helps when you want to have provide a valuable content migration. So we're kind of offering re-platforming in a way. So anywhere you want to re-platform from your old legacy content management system, this can be done through using all these tools that we have and the knowledge on SharePoint Online, but also Viva, Syntax, Compliance Center, etc. We're now heavy focusing on developing a partner ecosystem to get even better at all those specific aspects of the Microsoft 365 environment. So like Xilio, we really have proven support for all these ECM systems. We can do full service migrations. Our partners also will do that. It's really a compliant migration. It's all about transparency and traceability. Data visualization is part of it. So if you don't know what's really in it, you can use that to make the right decisions and to make the correct business rules. It's created to handle exceptions. It's never the same. So we always allow for some scripting within the framework. We have our unified data model. It standardizes and makes it efficient to connect different sources. So I talked about the strong focus on Microsoft 365 and basically have been doing it for 18 years. And that's really also part of the platform and part of the approach. So with that, I wanted to conclude. If you want to know more about how really we make sure that the Microsoft 365 environment is used in a better way using a migration, then please reach out, of course. You can reach me through my email or more generic sales email that will also work. Thanks a lot. I'll hand it back to you, Kevin.
That is Shuard Alkema from Xilio. Shuard, thank you so much for a wonderful presentation. We do have some questions coming in from the audience. The first one starts with Tim, who asks, does your link redirector work between files? In other words, between two Excel files referencing each other, and can it redirect references in macros?
It does work between files. So just a file share, when you link to another document, it does work. Redirecting references in macros, I'm not sure actually, but I can ask the team. But I don't know how that then looks as part of a link. But I know if you create in Windows a link, then it does work.
And can you share some project experiences about migration into Cortex?
Right. So into Viva, yeah, you mean using Syntax? So we have been Cortex launch partner, and now of course it's Viva. So our experience is that using or setting metadata or enriching where you can is very important there. And of course, you can use Syntax then also to do it. We have always been doing it as well. And yeah, basically it's all about content, right? Also with Cortex, it doesn't work really when you don't have the right content in your system. So in our experience is basically that doing a migration well helps you with setting up that Microsoft Viva in the right way. So it's very naturally to us in a way.
Now, Short, content migration is a big undertaking for most organizations, one that can be costly and complex. I need to sell the idea of doing a migration up the line. So from an executive point of view, what's one big way that I can use my content migration to improve my organization, improve my organizational performance in terms of things that move the needle, like customer experience or something that is helping build my organization, helping reach new markets, new revenues? Are there ways to use a migration to find that kind of improvement as well?
Yeah, I think so. So what we see is that the choice for Microsoft 365 as a collaboration platform, or also as in your primary content processes, I mean, that's not for nothing. It's because it's a good platform. It's efficient. You want to use it as an organization, but then you still have that old environment where everything sits in, where it's kind of stuck because it's integrated in your architecture. So one of the key things to do is to make sure that you you get out all the content in a correct way. You make sure you make the right decisions when migrating, and do it in a compliant way, right? So it's important, of course, to still keep the correct retention policies, etc. on all the documents when you migrate. So that's really our focus, to clean it up, make sure you add some value through enrichment, so you can search for it better, so you can collaborate better, so you don't have all that duplicates that potentially are in your old systems or multiple systems that you now are using. So those are all aspects of for selling that migration internally, I guess. Hope that helps.
That is Sjoerd Alkema, Director of Content Services with Zilio. Sjoerd, thank you so much for being a part of our event today.
Very welcome. Thank you.
Well, very good. We've had a wonderful event today with a number of really great speakers. I hope this has been of value to you as you examine the tools and techniques and the tricks really that will help you make the most of Microsoft 365. It just so happens, and I do want to turn it back to Nina to talk about this, it just so happens that AIIM has added a new course on M365. Nina, can you tell us about that AIIM Plus course and what's going on with that? Nina, are you with us? There, she's coming. You need to unmute, Nina. There we go. Now we can hear you. Okay, all right. Tell us more. AIIM Plus, M365 course, what's going on?
Yes, so AIIM does have a newest course that's out, M365 Outlook and Exchange, Tools and Practices for Good Governance. This is just for people that want to brush up on their M365 skills, or if you're looking for additional learning resources. Exchange contains information that many of us have a deep connection to, which is our email, of course. So if you're interested, go to aim.org /AIM-plus to sign up and access this course. AIM offers the freedom to experience all of AIM's training for as long as you need it. So monthly or annual subscriptions are available. As we bring this webinar to a close, a last few minute reminders, we've recorded this webinar so you can catch anything you want to hear again in a recap email that will be sent within 24 hours. A link to the resources for this webinar was put in the chat, and you'll find a copy of this presentation as well as additional resources through that link. Don't forget also to take our feedback surveys and let us know how we did. A big thank you to our underwriters, Arctis, Cadence Solutions, Fujitsu, Knowledge Lake, and Zilio. Without support from our solution provider, we wouldn't be able to bring you additional resources and free educational programming like we had today. Kevin, before we close it out, do you have any last minute closing remarks or anything you'd like to add about the presentations today?
Why, sure, Nina. Yeah, I was making notes as every presenter was going through the event today. Jordan Uderhagen started out today helping us understand the out-of-the-box capabilities in M365 and really how to get started with records management and information management with the platform. Jeff Melnick, who we've seen before, helped us understand some of the unique features, including security watermarks and restricted views and so much more in terms of security. Joe LeBay, Constantine Eck, really explored the depth of functionality and the extensibility options that make M365 a powerful platform to build our intelligent processing, document processing strategies. Scott Francis from Fujitsu, I'm telling you, it's all about creating an environment that easily converts paper into digital content. And he talked about the scanning without requiring the need to connect with a PC, server direct scanning, which I think is exciting. And of course, Shuard Alkema just finished his presentation on looking at how to migrate into 365 and use that as an opportunity. These were all great presentations today covering a variety of topics on N365. And so I hope that it has been a valuable event for our attendees today, and I'm looking forward to doing more of these in the future.
Same, Kevin. I learned a lot too about the different features that each company was presenting regarding M365. So as we're bringing this to a close, I do again want to thank everybody for joining us today. This is Nina from AIIM saying, see you next time. Take care, everyone.